What's up, guys, and welcome back to Quantum Comic. And today, we're diving into what's often considered one of the most controversial stories in DC Comics history, Convergence.
Now here's the interesting part. While this event got a lot of hate when it first dropped, over time, I've actually come around on it. These days, I kind of enjoy it. So what exactly is Convergence? The easiest way to understand it is to compare it to Secret Wars 2015 from Marvel Comics, but with its own twist. If you remember Secret Wars, you had God Emperor Doom ruling over Battleworld, where different realities were separated by massive barriers, unable to interact with one another. Now imagine something similar, but instead of keeping those realities isolated, the barriers are removed completely. Suddenly, all these different worlds collide, interact, and clash. That's essentially what Convergence is, a multiversal free-for-all, almost like a battle royale across timelines. One important thing to keep in mind, this story came out around 2014. It served as a kind of transition point, effectively closing the chapter on the New 52 era. But this was before major events like Rebirth or later Crisis-level storylines, so it sits in this interesting place in DC's history, older, a bit experimental, and definitely divisive. But as we go through it, you might find there's more to it than its reputation suggests.
So our comic opened with Superman, and he just says, Gotham City, a city where a great injustice was done. To me. You ignored me. You ignored my warnings, and now you want my help? And that's where Batman just says, you finally get your powers back, and that's why you're here? To make us beg? And then Superman says, on the contrary, I'm here to watch your faces as Rome burns. And then Batman just says, bastard, you're actually enjoying this. And that's where Superman says, hardly, but when the people chose you over me, Batman, they sealed their fate. And then Flash, and just then, Flash speeds past Superman and says to him, damn it, Superman, you want to save the world? Then prove it. And that's where Batman says, look beyond yourself, just this once, you egotistical maniac. Now we see the aftermath of Earth 2 World End. Now, we've already touched a bit on Earth 2, and honestly, you don't need the full World End breakdown to follow what's happening here. The key thing to remember is this: by the time we reach issue 26, Darkseid has finally made his move against Earth 2. If you think back, Earth 2 was first invaded by Steppenwolf, acting on Darkseid's orders. That initial assault wiped out the original Trinity, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. With them gone, a new generation of heroes rose up, the Wonders. Think of them as Earth 2's version of the Justice League, just rebuilt from the ashes. Then comes World End. Darkseid returns for round 2, and this time it looks like total annihilation is seconds away. But just before everything is wiped out, everyone is suddenly pulled away, vanished from the brink of death, and dropped somewhere else entirely. That somewhere is where things get weird. Among the survivors is Thomas Wayne, because in Earth 2, Thomas Wayne lived. While Bruce operated as Batman, Thomas stayed in the shadows. But after Bruce's death in Earth 2 #1, Thomas took up the mantle himself, becoming a far more brutal, vengeance-driven Batman. He's not alone either. You've got Jay Garrick as the Flash of this world, Val Zod as Superman, and Alan Scott as Green Lantern, though his power doesn't come from the emotional spectrum, but from the green itself, a force tied to nature. Then there's Dick Grayson, who in this reality isn't a traditional hero, but a war journalist. He was married to Barbara Gordon before her death, and now he's been pulled into this chaos along with everyone else. And just when things couldn't get stranger, Yolanda Montez shows up, alive. She's essentially the avatar of the Red on Earth 2, able to channel animalistic power, something we've touched on before. So here's the situation. All these people, who were moments away from dying at the hands of Darkseid, suddenly find themselves alive, but in a place they don't recognize. No one knows where they are. No one knows why they were saved. And then it gets worse. A massive dome begins to descend around them, sealing them in. Naturally, they try to fight it, break it, escape, but nothing works. It's completely impenetrable. And just as the confusion hits its peak, a figure appears before them.
And he asks, why are you here without your city? And then they says, our city was destroyed. We were the only ones left. As far as I can tell, we may not even have a planet anymore. And then he just says, no city? Unacceptable. And then he says, there are protocols for bringing guests to Telos. It is strange you arrive without a host city. Could I have miscalculated somehow? And then the avatar of Red just says, time for Mr. Stonepants to start answering a few of our... And then the Flash says, hold up. If we want to get out of here, we need to find out where we are first. And then the Green Lantern says, where is he, this master of yours? We need to talk to him. And then Telos says, I waited until the last moment before oblivion. Too soon would court cosmic disaster, just as my master always said. And then he says, away from here, leaving the decisions to me. And so here you are. No city? An error. And that's where Green Lantern says, you brought us here? Why? And that's where Telos says, to continue the work of my master, Brainiac, according to his purpose, his design, the ultimate God machine, he who will judge. And that's where Superman says, you have no power over us, creature. And then he says, on the contrary, without me, this place, you would be dead. And yet, you are not. You are here, the final piece, the last of all the worlds that were or ever will be collected. Perhaps this is a sign, the signal my master told me would one day come. And that's where he says, yes, it must be, the time when all must be put in opposition to determine which will be replanted in the universe of worlds, and which will perish. Look upon your rival worlds, my test subjects. And that's when everything truly opens up. They're suddenly exposed to something far bigger than they ever imagined. Countless worlds, entire realities, all existing side by side, and somehow all of them have been captured and preserved here.
At this point, the obvious question hits. What exactly is going on? To understand that, you have to go back to Brainiac. You already know the basics. He travels across the universe, stealing cities from different worlds, shrinking them down and sealing them inside bottles as part of his collection. Every living being inside those cities, trapped, preserved, studied. The most famous example, the bottled city of Kandor from Krypton, but Convergence takes that idea and expands it to an entirely new level. Here, we're not dealing with just one Brainiac, we're dealing with a multiversal version of him, and instead of collecting cities, he collects entire fragments of realities, whole timelines, whole worlds, all ripped from their existence and stored away. That's why this story feels so massive, because it's not just worlds colliding, it's realities meeting each other. And just when that realization begins to sink in, that's when Val-Zod turns to Telos and speaks. Free them now. And so Telos tells him, I shall, to fight, one world opposed by another, until only one remains. And then Batman just says, a perverse tournament. And so he says, one I predict you will not survive. Behold, as I reach out to all that inhabit my world and speak to them as one. And then he says, citizens of my world, I have brought convergence upon you. Now is the time. The hour is near. Judgment is here. Only one city shall survive, only the strong. Since your arrival, I have been the air that you breathe, the water you drink. I am the very ground you walk upon. I am your starless sky. I am this world. I am Telos. I have tended to your every need, but now the domes will fall and champions must rise. Never have the powerful among you been more necessary. For you are about to partake in the greatest experiment of all. Your time has ended, your worlds are dead, but I have the power to grant one city a future. Some of you came to me at a time of infinite crisis. Others were brought here in the final moments of their 0 hour, whether it was a flashpoint for a time that never was, or of kingdoms that will never come. Everyone here was granted life as a result of my dominion. That changes now. Today, creativity turns to competition, and one city among many will survive this day. Defenders of each domain will battle the other, and only the greatest of heroes will live. Deny me, Your people will be destroyed. Disobey me, your cities will be crushed in my hand. Dare to circumvent these conflicts in any way, and the citizens of every city will pay the price. There is no room for compassion. Make no alliance among you, no quarter given.
And of course, just to make things even wild, one of those captured realities happens to be home to Captain Carrot. Yes, that Captain Carrot, a full-on superhero bunny. And honestly, he's kind of amazing. So, when he shows up, you can imagine the reaction. These heroes coming from all these different worlds take one look at him, and there's this brief moment of disbelief. Like, out of everything they've seen so far, this might be the strangest thing yet. And that's when every heroes turn to him and say, "You're crazy if you think they're going to fight each other." But Telos doesn't argue. He doesn't need to, because to him, this isn't insanity, it's purpose. They must fight to defend their people. No, it is destiny. It is convergence. Witness, it has begun. And with that, we shift gears into the first major storyline we're going to follow, Superman. Now, there's a very specific reason for starting here. As part of Convergence, every storyline is broken down into two-part arcs. The main event itself runs 8 issues, but each side story, like this one, focuses on different characters pulled from different realities. In this Superman story, it's incredibly important, not just for Convergence, but for the larger direction of DC Comics as a whole. It quietly bridges a gap that's left a lot of readers confused for a long time. If you already know where this is going, keep it to yourself, because the payoff is worth it. So, the story drops us right into one of these domed cities, specifically Gotham. A Gotham sealed off from the outside world, trapped under an impenetrable barrier, and cutting through the streets faster than the eye can follow is Superman, racing across the city. Watch your step. You aren't him, you know. And he says, "True enough, but if Batman can do this without powers, I can too." But Lois says, he spent years developing his skills. Plus, he's obsessed and nasty. And as Superman moves through the streets of Gotham, something immediately feels off. It doesn't take long before he pinpoints the source, what looks like a drug deal unfolding in the shadows of the city. A quiet exchange, tense, secretive, but to Superman, it's as clear as day. Before he can jump in, though, Lois Lane speaks up, reminding him that things here aren't as simple as they seem. You're the opposite. And Superman jumps in, and Lois says, "They're probably armed, so keep moving. You haven't been invulnerable for almost a year. And whatever you do, Clark, be careful." And Superman just says, "No need to worry. With all I have to live for, I'm not about to get reckless." And this guy realized that Superman is here. They all starts fight with Superman, and Superman calls Lois and says, "Lois, do you hear?" And so Lois replies him and says, "Yes, some kind of citywide broadcast. Focus on the task at hand. We'll deal with it when you're safe." But one of them says, "You shouldn't have butted in, Mystery Man." And Superman does not have superpowers, and he starts fighting with this raccoon and says, "Stop you from making life in the dome even worse." And so Lois says, with Gotham cut off from the rest of the world, drug runners couldn't get their product into the city. And that's where Superman completes his lines and says, "Whoa, I knew those creeps would lead me to something decent, but this rocks it." So these losers used chemicals they knew little about to synthesize their own. And then Lois says, which ended up killing a lot of people. And that's when things take a sudden turn. Over the comms, Lois Lane starts to panic, her voice cutting through with real, "Oh my God, Clark, are you okay?" For a split second, it sounds like something's gone terribly wrong. But then, calm as ever, Superman responds, steady, controlled, completely unfazed. "Don't worry, Lois, I'm fine." And that's the moment everything changes. The dome is gone. With it, Superman feels the full return of his powers. Strength, speed, flight, everything surging back all at once. And when you look at him now, this isn't just any version of Superman. This is the classic one. The same Superman that existed after Crisis on Infinite Earths. The pre-Flashpoint version that longtime fans recognize instantly. The tone, the presence, even the way he carries himself. It all lines up, and that's not an accident.
There's a very deliberate reason DC chose this Superman for this moment, because this story isn't just another side tale. It's quietly setting up something much bigger. It's laying the groundwork for changes that ripple across the entire DC universe, even into what's happening right now. That's why this arc matters so much, and that's what makes the moment hit even harder. All these criminals just stop and stare, because in their minds, this doesn't make any sense. Superheroes in Gotham, under that dome, were powerless. That was the rule. No powers, no exceptions. So when they see Superman standing there like nothing's changed, their first reaction is pure disbelief. There's no way that's Superman. Not here, but confusion quickly turns into panic, and like criminals always do when they're out of options, they open fire. Gunshots ring out. But it doesn't matter. The bullets hit him and bounce off like they're nothing. Not even a flinch, not even a step back. Because this is Superman at full power again. And in that instant, everything flips. Because now, Gotham isn't dealing with a powerless hero anymore. It's dealing with the real Superman.
And just when it seems like things are under control, the situation escalates. One of the criminals manages to grab Jimmy Olsen, who of course has been right in the middle of it all, snapping photos like always. For a moment, it looks bad. But this is Superman we're talking about. In the blink of an eye, he closes the distance, disarms the guy, and neutralizes the threat without breaking a sweat. The rest of the criminals don't last much longer. Just like that, the chaos is over. The day, saved. But that's not the part that really matters, because once everything settles, Superman doesn't just stop and move on. He starts looking around, and that's when it hits him. Something about this place isn't right. And he says, probably has enough photos for a special edition if he can finally get them into Perry's hands. And so Lois says, all I know is that after all this time, but as Superman scans the city, trying to make sense of everything that's changed, he's also doing something else. He's heading home, and that's where this story really starts to matter, because the moment he walks back in, Lois Lane is waiting for him, and you can tell immediately this isn't just about what happened out there. There's something bigger going on. That's when she looks at him and says, "It's awesome to see you flying again." And then he says, "No kidding, Lois. I'd forgotten how mundane stairs and elevators can be. I didn't mind playing the role of normal civilian when it was my choice, but when that's actually forced on you." And so Lois gets closer to Superman and she says, "Come on now, no more fussing. My Superman has returned. The dome that kept us here is gone. And more important, we can leave. Our baby will be in Metropolis." And so Superman says, "Just in time too. You're right on the cusp of your due date." And he's just being a gentleman and says, "Come on, have a seat." Lois sits down, smiling, and says, "Whew, don't mind if I do. I am so ready to bring this little guy into the world." And then Superman says, "Still thinking it's a boy?" And then she says, "No fair using your vision powers to peak, Smallville. I want the surprise of it all." And then Superman says, "The doctor says the baby is healthy. That's all that matters." And then she says, "Despite being stuck here in Gotham, we're still blessed. I don't know that I've ever been happier." Superman was like, "Same here." And she says, "Despite being cut off from Metropolis and having no way to publish, we covered and wrote about what happened here." And then Superman says, "Perry would expect no less. We had time together, Lois, more than we ever would have had otherwise." And then Lois just asks, "The Midnight Crime Buster enjoyed having a sidekick?" Superman answers him and says, "Every Batman needs a Robin." And then Lois says, "Oh, I'd look just great in a pair of tights and yellow cape right about now. About that voice, shouldn't you go and check?" And then Superman says, "In a minute, Lois. Let's enjoy this while we can."
And so, as the chaos dies down, Superman and Lois Lane take a rare moment to breathe. Just a quiet evening, but even that calm doesn't last, because they replay the transmission sent out by Telos, and that's when everything becomes clear. This isn't random. This isn't coincidence. They've all been brought here for a reason, a tournament. Different cities, different realities, all forced into conflict, with only one outcome: survival. And just like that, the scope of the situation becomes terrifyingly real. From there, the story shifts, now taking us to Gotham City, but not the one we know. This is the Gotham of Flashpoint,
A world that, as far as most people believed, was completely erased, wiped out when the timeline reset. So yeah, the obvious question is, how is it still here? And that's one of the mysteries this story begins to answer. Because in this reality, standing in the shadows of a much darker Gotham is Thomas Wayne. And as he takes in everything happening around him, he finally speaks, "Prepare yourselves for war." And Cyborg just says, "We can't leap to that conclusion yet." And Batman tells them, "Anyone capable of imprisoning us here powerless can force whatever they want, Cyborg." And Green Lantern was like, okay. Now, it's important to understand how different this Flashpoint universe really is. Here, Green Lantern isn't Hal Jordan. Instead, it's Abin Sur, the alien who, in the main timeline, crash lands on Earth and passes the ring on. But in this reality, he survives. He becomes Earth's Green Lantern himself. There's even a side story, Flashpoint Abin Sur, the Green Lantern, where his journey goes even further, eventually leading him to become something even more powerful. It's honestly a really cool twist on the character. And that's not all. You've also got Captain Thunder, this universe's version of Shazam, a completely different take, but just as powerful, if not more dangerous in certain ways. So when all these heavy hitters are standing together, trying to figure out what's happening, Captain Thunder finally breaks the silence and says, "Batman is right. If we want to win, we'd better strike first." And then we have Flashpoint version of Superman, and he says, "I disagree, Captain Thunder. What if..." But Cyborg interrupts him and says, "You were sheltered in Project Superman, El. You don't know how lethal this can get." And Captain Thunder says, "We do. War is familiar to us." And Flashpoint Superman just says, I've seen plenty of bad." But in the middle of all this argument, where Batman just says, "Too late. I have a flyer coming in hard and fast from the other Gotham. Assume the worst. It's them or us. Take him out."
Now, of course, we know this is Superman, and he's not here to fight. Even with tensions high, he has no intention of hurting anyone. Instead, he stays calm, trying to keep things from escalating. And that's when he says, "It feels good to leave Gotham. It was founded to be a dark and dreary city." And then he says, "The Gotham ahead appears worse, far more repugnant than our worlds. In fact, it appears their Bruce Wayne owns a string of casinos." But in the middle, Flashpoint Superman overtakes him, and he's saying is, "Out of my way. I've seen her. She's alive." And then Superman says, "Whoever that was, I didn't see him coming. He's as fast as Wally and headed your way." But suddenly Captain Thunder comes and starts beating Superman. And Lois was like, "Clark, what's wrong? What's happening?" Captain Thunder grips Superman tightly and says, "I've seen firsthand what happens when the enemy strikes first." And then Lois says, "Talk to me, Clark. Tell me how I can help." Captain Thunder throws Superman and introduces himself and says, "The name's Captain Thunder. Not that you'll live long enough to remember it." Superman's body tearing through rock and debris, crashing violently into the ground. And Captain Thunder walks forward through the dust and destruction. And so he says, "Batman was wasting his time worrying about you. You are nothing." And then Superman charges back and he says, "If true, for real, that would make you less than nothing. You have a counterpart on my world, Thunder. He'd know enough to listen." And he just asks, "Do you?" And Batman whispers in Captain Thunder's ear, and he just says, "That face, he resembles Subject 1. Kryptonian? Maybe trying to trick us?" And at that moment, Cyborg and Abin Sur arrive on that scene, and Cyborg just says, "We'll do whatever it takes to save our people, mister, even if it includes taking you apart." And then Abin Sur asks his simple doubt, "I have doubts about this, Cyborg. You're jumping to conclusions. Let's talk." And that's where Superman says, "Stop. Listen to me. No one has to die today." And at that point, Abin Sur says, "What if he's on the level? I suggest we hear him out." And then Cyborg says, "Risky, but I'm willing if you are, Robin. We can trust that you're here alone, and no one else is attacking our city." And then Superman says, "You have my word." But at that point, Jimmy Olsen has arrived on Whiz Wagon, basically an armored artillery vehicle, and starts gearing up to fire on everyone. And just like that, a situation Superman was trying to keep peaceful is about to explode into full-blown chaos. And at that point, Abin Sur was like, "It appears you're right, Cyborg." And Cyborg just says, "Do what you must. Don't hold back. Let him have it."
Now we pick up with Flashpoint Superman, who arrives to meet Lois. Now, one important thing about the Flashpoint universe:
General Sam Lane was deeply involved in Project Superman. Lois Lane is the one who actually discovers Superman, and the two of them spend real time together. But her story doesn't end well. She eventually joins the Resistance and dies. And for Superman, that loss is everything. It's his first true experience of losing someone who actually mattered to him. So when he suddenly learns that Lois might be alive here, he doesn't hesitate. He immediately goes looking for her. At the same time, Thomas Wayne is standing in this version of Gotham, taking it all in, studying it, comparing it to his own broken world. And as he looks around, something about this place doesn't sit right with him. And that's when he says, "There, Gotham. Is it from Barry Allen's world? One where Bruce is alive? I thought that world, that timeline would replace ours if it meant my son would live again. So much the better." So here's what's really going on. During Flashpoint, Barry Allen travels back in time and saves his mother, an act that completely rewrites reality. That's what creates the Flashpoint universe in the first place. Later, Barry realizes something is wrong with help from Reverse Flash, and before he fixes everything, he tells Thomas Wayne something crucial. In his original timeline, Bruce Wayne is alive. At the end of the story, when Barry goes back to restore the timeline and let his mother die, Thomas gives Barry a letter for Bruce, a final message from father to son. Now, logically, when Barry reset the timeline, the Flashpoint universe should have been erased completely.
But in Convergence, we learn something different. Just like many other realities, this universe was pulled out right before its destruction and preserved here. That's why Thomas Wayne is struggling, because now, standing in this new world, there's a possibility, however small, that his son might still be alive. The catch, he doesn't realize this isn't Barry's original timeline. He doesn't know this is a different continuity entirely. So in his mind, this could be the world where Bruce lives. And that uncertainty? That's exactly why he asks the question. If it is the reality where his son is alive, which there are any number of realities where it's like that, how do I fight them? How do I fight my own son? And in the middle of that, the Flashpoint of Superman comes in front of Lois, and he addresses her, and he was like, "You must remember me. You know me." Then Lois says, "A version of you, but..." And so when he finally moves toward her, she calls out, "Clark," but he can't answer. Not yet, because Superman is right in the middle of a fight, and the situation is almost ironic. While she's reaching for him, he's locked in a standoff with Captain Thunder, Cyborg, and Aben Sur. But even here, he's not trying to hurt anyone. He's holding back, defending, containing, trying to keep things from spiraling. In the middle of it all, he swoops in, saves Jimmy Olsen, and calmly brings the whiz wagon down to the ground, ending that threat instantly. Then he turns back to the others and finally addresses them, calm, controlled, and clear, saying, "Now's your chance, people. The only reasonable thing to do is work together to save both cities." And that's where Captain Thunder just says, "We can't take that chance." Like the voice said, one city lives, the other dies. And that's the moment Superman realizes the truth. There's no reasoning with them, not because they're evil, but because they're desperate. Even if they understand he's not their enemy, it doesn't matter. The fear of losing, of being wiped out, overrides everything else. And in a situation like this, survival comes first, no matter the cost. So in that moment, Superman stops holding back just enough to make a point. He fires his heat vision and melts the cannon on Cyborg, disabling it instantly. Clean, precise, no unnecessary damage.
And that's when it really clicks for them. This guy can do everything Subject 1 can, only better. The power gap becomes painfully obvious. And that's when Captain Thunder just looks at him and says, "Fine by me." Means I can really cut loose and let him have it. And that's when Captain Thunder just unloads on him. Punch after punch, hitting Superman with everything he's got. But the crazy part? It's barely doing anything. Superman just stands there, blocking, absorbing the hits, almost casually. His focus isn't even fully on the fight anymore, because in the distance, he hears her, Lois Lane, calling out. And in that exact moment, everything else fades. He turns, distracted, locked onto that voice, and that's when he says, "We're done here.
I don't know what happened to make your world so tragically different from mine, and right now, I don't care. People I care about are in danger, and I will move heaven and earth alike to keep them safe. And just as Abin Sur moves in to strike, Jimmy Olsen jumps in and fires a shot, one that actually incapacitates Abin Sur for a moment. That split second, that's all Superman needs. He breaks away and takes off. But while all of that chaos is happening, something much bigger is going down elsewhere. Because the Flashpoint Superman shows up, right inside Thomas Wayne's Batcave. And the moment he appears, everything instantly feels different. And he says, Lois needs a doctor, and I can't risk taking her to a hospital. And Batman says, how did you find this place, El? And Flashpoint Superman says, I hear whatever I want. See-through walls, buildings, masks. There's no such thing as a secret where I'm concerned, Dr. Wayne. And Batman just says, that's Lois Lane from the other Gotham. And Lois Lane says, I can promise you this, take me back now and you won't be hurt. You have no idea who and what you're messing with. He'll, come for me. And Batman asks why, and Flashpoint Superman just says, Lois is the only person that truly cared about him. But Subject Zero killed her. Everyone else wanted to use me. But Lois was sweet. I love her. And Thomas just says, those people are our enemies, El. And Flashpoint Superman says, she's not an enemy. She will never be my enemy. I won't allow anyone to hurt her. Now we switch over to Superman, where Superman arrives at that apartment where Lois Lane is supposed to be. But at that moment, Abin Sur has arrived, and he says, I have traveled the galaxies. I know a true enemy when I see one. You clearly are not. And then Superman says, I don't have time for this, Abin. I'm leaving. But Abin doesn't move. Instead, he drops the truth and says, you already know where she is. And Superman says, thanks to her resourcefulness, you're Gotham. A cave. And so at that point, Abin Sur revealing the truth, where Flashpoint holds Lois Lane in his arms and says, your Kryptonian counterpart was confined throughout childhood, never to develop as you did. The love of his life, a very young Lois Lane, died in his arms. And then Superman says, so that's why he took Lois. At least, I know he won't try to hurt her. And then Abin Sur explains the nature of Flashpoint Superman, why they fight, why they don't trust anyone, why survival is the only rule that matters in the Flashpoint reality. In hearing all of that, it clicks for Superman.
Not that he was ever going to destroy them, but now he understands them. There's empathy there, a reason to reach them instead of fighting. And then he pieces it together. The reason the Superman brought Lois to Thomas Wayne is because Thomas is a doctor. Which means one thing, Lois Lane is about to go into labor, and right on cue, that's exactly what happens. Superman arrives, steps in, and quickly handles the Flashpoint Superman. No drawn-out fight, just efficiency. And in the middle of all that tension, all that chaos, Batman looks at him and says, is there anyone who can't find this place? And then, Superman comes in front of Batman and says, show him. Lois made it easy. And honestly, she kinda made it easy. Lois Lane had her headset on the entire time, which meant Superman could lock onto her instantly. With his senses, tracking her signal was effortless. So while everything else was chaotic, finding Lois, that was the easiest part. And so, for a brief moment, Superman and Thomas Wayne actually talk, not fight, talk. And you can feel the tension shifting. The guards start to drop just a little as understanding begins to take over. Superman looks at Thomas Wayne, really looks at him, and in that moment, everything he's learned starts to come together. And that's when he says, you're a doctor. You can deliver the baby. And Thomas just says, I know. I haven't since Bruce died. I don't think you can use my equipment. And that's exactly what happens. Superman uses the Batcave equipment to help Lois Lane deliver their son right in the middle of all this chaos.
And just like that, everything slows down. No fighting, no tension, just this quiet, powerful moment as they hold their baby for the first time. Standing there, Thomas Wayne watches it all unfold. looking at the child, then at them, and you can see it hit him. And that's when he says, "You know Bruce?" And Superman says, "Very well. He's a good man." And Thomas Wayne just says, "I held my son as his life slipped away. Life is the most precious commodity there is. Whatever you have to do it to protect that child." And Superman was like, "Of course I do." And then Lois just asking a question, "Our son needs a name. Jor? After your father?" And then Superman just says, "You know, I think of myself as human." And then Lois says, "Jonathan then. Jonathan Samuel Kent." And here's the crazy part. This baby, this is the same Jonathan Kent who exists in the main DC universe today. So how does that even make sense? That's where Convergence comes in. After everything wraps up, Superman, Lois Lane, and Jonathan end up living in the New 52 timeline, quietly, off the radar. While the younger New 52 Superman is out there with the Justice League, this older, experienced Superman is operating in the shadows, handling threats before they ever become public. And then DC ties it all together with Superman Reborn. That story merges the New 52 Superman with the pre-Flashpoint Superman, creating the version we have today, which means the current Superman, Lois, and Jonathan all trace back to this moment. And with that, we wrap things up. Hope you enjoyed it. Drop a like if you did, and I'll catch you next time.